Let's talk some Chukar volleyball today. Hey guys, welcome back to the What the Chuck podcast. And today we're going to give you the 2026 Chukar volleyball breakdown before we get into actual season play where they play other teams. Let's get into this. Today we're going to obviously be talking about the Chukar volleyball team. We are into the point in the podcast where we're talking pretty much just Chukars at this point. We understand what the NWAC is now. We understand what the East region is now. We are into Chukar sports officially. And if there's obviously other crazy news coming out of the NWAC or the East region, obviously give you that content as well. But at this point, we're really just focusing on Chukar sports and other stuff like branding and marketing and all that. But TVCC, boom. Let's get into it, starting with the volleyball breakdown before we get into the season for the 2026-2027 campaign. And then we'll give you soccer later on and, going into the fall sports for TVCC. And we're going to be talking about, the actualities of what is the thought process going into the season, what has happened last year that has impacted our mindset going into this volleyball season, key losses to the Chukar roster from last year, if they graduated or not, if they transferred out, key losses that'll definitely impact us in some negative way. Hopefully it doesn't impact us very much in a negative way, but it definitely hurts for these individuals to be not on the Chukar roster. And then there's, notable athletes that are returning this year, and we'll also be talking about the 2026 commits for the TVCC, so the 2026 recruiting class. So these are all the new faces that we'll see on the Chukar volleyball roster, and we're talking about the total number of athletes that left, total number of athletes that are returning, plus the recruiting class, and a little background on the coaches and all that fun stuff. Let's get right into it. So first we're going to be talking about kind of the back of your head actualities. So these specific facts are kind of in the back of your head as you're going through this next season of Chukar volleyball. And first of all, we have to talk about where they're going to be playing their home games this year. And obviously that'll be at the John J. Easley Memorial Gymnasium on campus of Treasure Valley Community College. The other thing is going on championship banner reveals. So in my thought is they're probably going to be showing that probably the first region game, but I don't know anything specific about that. That's just my thought process of how they're going to do it. And maybe even a possible East region championship banner as well. Don't know, but I'm for sure definitely they're going to do something to show that we were the NWAC champions from last year, obviously. So there you have that. Success pouring in, boom, boom. We'll get into that later on how that could be maybe a bad thing for the Chukars going into this season based on past success and going into this season with kind of a different vibe and roster look, team look for the Chukars this year. We'll talk about that later on in the show today. Another thing is first-year head coach Amber Fouts. That is another thing you got to be thinking about. This is the first year she's been a head coach of volleyball at the collegiate level. She's had some history with being a head coach at the high school level, but this is her first head coaching job in college volleyball. And also the thought of we have to defend the NWAC title. We got to defend our East region title from last year. Those are also thoughts going into this season as well. We are coming off of our first NWAC championship in TVCC athletic history. No sports have gotten that far and won. And we got there last year for the Chukar volleyball program, our first ring in athletics history here at TVCC. New era of Chukar volleyball begins this year in 2026 with Amber Fouts being our first-year head coach, and also our assistant coach Maddie Spielman coming into the staff for the volleyball team as well. Now let's talk about those are the thoughts going into this season, and they're always going to be there going into the season, no matter how it plays out, no matter how successful we are, no matter how much we get better, no matter how much we get worse. So that sort of thing there. But you're always going to be thinking about these sort of things, especially the new era and defending our title with the NWAC and the East Region title, and that plays a factor. That plays a factor. It could be in a positive way or a negative way, and like I said earlier, we'll talk about that. Now, let's talk about some recruiting advantages that go into this since we were NWAC champions. So, as a recruit, you're going in, like, obviously you're picking a school, all that. If you're coming out of your senior year of high school, you're going to be looking at programs and how successful they've been. That's just a standard. You have to at least look at what they've been doing for the last 5 years. There's some athletes have their own, requirements of a school that they're going to pick. Sometimes they're picking a school based on academic success, how strong of an academic program the school is. And then some of them are looking at, obviously, the success of the sport, how have they actually done? And, like, for example, if you're looking at a school where the sport you want to get recruited on, if they went 0-20, that looks worse than looking at a team that went 20-0 and won a championship. There's that advantage there. And that's what's really nice about what we did last year. It's obviously an advantage for getting these recruits coming in 2026, and even later on in 27, 28, they see this success here at TVCC, and they want to be a part. Most of them want to be a part of this. There's that factor as well, and it's a really good thing here, especially just looking at the talent that we acquired coming out of the 2026 class. We'll get into that later. Just looking at that, pretty happy based on how this roster looks so far going into the season. And again, it's early. We're not going into East Region games yet. We're even playing teams that aren't even in the NWAC. Where you can play club teams and all that, tournaments and stuff. Very early in this process, but just to give you that foundation, and just the mindset of how this is going to look this year, and just break it all down. This is what this show is for today. Now let's talk about the key losses that the Chukars have to deal with in our roster this year. So, key losses, obviously we have to start with the NWAC Tournament Player of the Year last year. That's Caitlin Markley. She was an outside hitter for us, and obviously Player of the Year just says it all. Awesome player, really helped us to where we got last year. Our setter from last year, Naomi Shipley. Carly Clark, outside hitter, defensive specialist, libero Josie Cook, Kensington Bandley, and Lexi Barnes. Those are a couple of the names that will really impact our success this year, based on them not being on the roster. You don't have that talent anymore. And obviously just these 6 names, the NWAC title speaks for itself. This team was good, but these 6 individuals and more, obviously, really set the tone of how successful that season was last year. And it's going to hurt no matter what happens. It's going to hurt that these individuals are not on the roster this year, because they graduated. These are all sophomores, and the one negative thing about last year was there were a lot of sophomores on the roster last year, and the NWAC being a 2-year community college league, you got freshman year, then sophomore year, then you're done. You only get 2 years of this process, and that's one little negative thing about that. But it's gonna hurt having these individuals not on the team this year. Now, the total number of athletes that actually left, there is a total number of 10 athletes that left. So there is 10 individuals that will not be wearing the Chukar uniform this year that played on the championship team last year. The total number of athletes returning, familiar faces, 5 athletes plus the commits, the recruits from the 2026 class of this year. So 5, and then boom, all your recruits you got there as well. So now we're going to jump right into kind of looking at the backgrounds of our coaching staff when it comes to Chukar volleyball this year. And we got to talk about our first-year head coach first, talk about the background, you know. This is a little portion of her bio on, if you go to the staff directory on the TVCC athletics page, you can see a bio about everybody and kind of their journey of getting to where they are today, obviously. So this is a little portion of that from here, quote unquote, quoted and stuff. And let's take a look at this. Let's hear it, and we'll analyze, you know, her journey and how that is going to prove a factor going into this season. So here we go. Amber Fouts brings over 14 years of coaching experience to her role as the head coach of Treasure Valley Community College. A dedicated and passionate leader, Fouts has built her career around developing athletes, fostering team culture, and building competitive, character-driven programs throughout the Treasure Valley. During the 2025-2026 season, Fouts served as the assistant volleyball coach for TVCC, where she played an integral role in helping guide the team to its first ever NWAC championship title, a historic moment for the program and college. Before joining TVCC, Fouts made a major impact at Valley View High School in Caldwell, Idaho, where she served as the head varsity coach. In her first year, she led a remarkable turnaround, taking a last-seeded team to the state tournament. Her influence extended well beyond the court, with more than 15 of her former athletes continuing their volleyball careers at the collegiate level. So, just reading that, this individual, this person has had success in her career. You know, she knows what success looks like. And that's really good going into, you know, your first year of being a head coach at the collegiate level. You've already experienced very much success at the high school level, and then you go into the collegiate side of things and you've won an NWAC title as an assistant coach. That really helps because you're getting pretty much mentored by the head coach previously. You've won an NWAC championship, obviously. You've won a championship at the college level. That is impressive by itself. And, you know, it's usually not normal for, you know, having a head coach obviously win the NWAC title, and then you're obviously not the head coach the next year. So this is a little unorthodox for this situation, but I think honestly, when it comes to, you know, experience and coaching wise for this team, I don't think nothing's really changed in a negative way. The experience that Coach Fouts has, you know, being in the locker room, you know, and experiencing the system and the grind and all of that, getting to a collegiate title and winning one, I don't think anything negative has changed there. So if there's any worries about that from any of you, don't worry about it, because coach-wise will be perfectly okay. And that goes into learning about the journey that our new assistant coach has, Maddie Spielman. She is also the recruiting coordinator for the volleyball program. So Maddie Spielman, her journey, just will go through all the teams she's been on and, you know, her coaching her career pretty much. So she started out in 2018, coaching career-wise. She was the head coach of Nissa High School from 2018 to 2023. She was the assistant coach at Parma High School in Idaho from 2023 to 2024. She also maintained a role of the director of operations for the Top Notch Club volleyball team from 2024 to 2026. And she was the head coach of Valley View, taking over for Coach Amber Fouts, actually, the year after she left to get a role as the assistant coach at TVCC. Coach Spielman took over that role in 2025. And now, obviously, she's the recruiting coordinator and assistant coach at TVCC. So here's her journey there. And she is, you know, she's used to success as well, you know. There's no I don't think there should be any worry about experience. If there's any conversation about experience being a negative factor, I just don't see it, And that's just me. That's my personal opinion there. But, having experience is one of the most important things when it comes to, coaching and stuff. Not even just coaching, pretty much anything in general. Experience is the key factor there. And there's just no worry in my mind for that. And they're used to success. They've been in successful situations and all that. And that goes into talking about notable accomplishments that these Chukar coaches have had. So Amber Fouts has had experience, state bursts at the high school level. She's been to the state tournament as a head varsity coach. And obviously she won an NWAC title being an assistant coach at a collegiate volleyball program. And Maddie Spielman, 10 years of volleyball coaching experience, really says, she's got some idea of what she's doing. 10 years is a lot, and we'll learn it as the season goes. But, there's no worry. There's no worry experience-wise. And we'll see if the job gets done this year from like a new era, being a new head coach at the collegiate level. But as of this point, excited for the season and how that progresses going through the season on to, postseason stuff and all that cool stuff there. So now that we've kind of give the background of the coaches, the coaching staff, and some players that won't be returning sadly, and all the background information and all that, we got to give a rough view of what the team is going to look like this year. Again, this is a rough view. This is not a very specific, process of how it's actually going to look. This is just looking at, websites and just looking at it from, 30 seconds of analyzing, nothing statistical or, based on statistics and all that. This is just looking at it for 30 seconds and being like, okay, I kind of get the vibe of where this is going, but we'll just talk about it in the episode. So, rough view of the team is going to look like. Notable returners that are returning for the Chukar volleyball team this year is Olivia Fisher, Audrey Swishso, Brecca Day, Vivian Schmidt, and Brooklyn Page. They were freshmen on the title team, and they're going into their sophomore year this year. So they got that experience of success as well. Now, let's learn who the 2026 TVCC volleyball recruiting class is. We'll give you guys the name, we'll give you guys the position they play, where they're from, and what high school did they play the sport of volleyball at. Start with Daniela Alfonso. She is an opposite/outside hitter. She went to Caldwell, Idaho, played volleyball at Valley View High School. Jocelyn Graham, defensive specialist, is from Burns, Oregon, went to Burns High School. Chevian Peters is a setter from American Fork, Utah. She went to Lone Peak High School. Feely Liava is a defensive specialist from Heber City, Utah. She went to Wasatch High School. Madison Maxwell, outside hitter, is from Richland, Washington. Allie Dilbeck is a libero/defensive specialist from Meridian, Idaho. She went to Meridian High School. Oh, shoot. Missed that. Allie Dilbeck, sorry. Libero/defensive specialist, Melba, Idaho. Sorry. Apologize for that. Melba, Idaho, went to Melba High School. Now, Paisley Shaw is the outside hitter. She's from Meridian, Idaho, and she went to Meridian High School. Apologize for that. Sorry. Now, Alina Bout, libero/defensive specialist. She's from Boise, Idaho. She went to Bora High School. Sophia Doxey, outside hitter/opposite. She is from Hyde Park, Utah. She went to Skyview High School. Bailey King is a middle blocker/opposite. She is from Vail, Oregon, and went to Vail High School. And to wrap up the recruiting class for this year, Kaylee May, middle blocker from Meridian, Idaho. She went to Mountain View High School. So that is your new faces for the Chukar volleyball team this year. coming out of high school, you got freshmen. Now this is the interesting view here. I'm going to give you some pipeline thoughts, kind of the general area of where Chukar coaches like to recruit, and give yourself something to think about, like in future recruiting classes, where are they most likely gonna pick athletes from, so a total number of 5 recruits came from the state of Idaho, 2 recruits came from the state of Oregon, 3 recruits from Utah, and 1 recruit from Washington. So based on those very small, facts there, very, slight facts there, Idaho is definitely the favorite, pipeline area to look from, kind of in the Meridian, Boise, Nampa area. And, there's also variety there, slight variety. You got Utah recruits, and you got 1 Washington recruit from Richland, Washington. But mostly, I think you guys should expect probably Idaho recruits from the area of Boise, Meridian, Nampa, which makes sense because obviously Coach Fouts and Coach Spielman, used to work at Valley View High School, which is in that area, and they live in that area. I believe looking at the bio from Coach Fouts on the TVCC athletic page, I think she lives in Homedale, which is pretty much in the area of Caldwell, I believe. And it makes sense. Pipeline makes sense. Probably expect Idaho recruits, and little pieces of Oregon, pieces of Utah, all that in the next couple of recruiting classes to come for the TVCC Chukars. Now, to wrap up that little Mamma Jamma recruiting class-wise, recap numbers, just looking from this. So, 11 commits committed to TVCC volleyball program, and 5 returning athletes. That makes a grand total of 16 student athletes for the 2026 Chukar volleyball roster. Now, NWAC rules, based on NWAC codes and guidelines and all that, NWAC rules state that 15 athletes are allowed to suit up for competition, volleyball-wise, specifically. So that means since there's 16 student athletes, 1 has to redshirt this year, and that is another conversation to have in another episode. But just from that perspective there, 1 student athlete has to be redshirted for the Chukars this year. So, now that we know that the new face is going into TVCC this year, we're going to finish up this show today talking about volleyball statistics to reach based on previous success. So we're going to talk about the statistics that the Chukars were most successful in last year and where we have to be as a team this year if we want to be that successful this year in 2026. So let's start with this. Obviously, 2025 stats. Got to talk about kills. The Chukars last year had a total number of 634 kills when playing against NWAC competition. They ranked 9th in the NWAC for that. Kills per set, they averaged around 13.78, ranked 1st in the NWAC for that. Errors, 173 errors, so that's a bad thing. Ranked 31st in the NWAC, so that's really good. Really good. One of the least error-filled teams in the NWAC. That's a very good stat there. Hitting percentage was a .288 percentage, ranked 1st in the NWAC. Assists, 558, ranked 9th in the NWAC. Assists per set, averaged around 12, ranked 2nd in the NWAC. Service aces, 110, ranked 5th in the NWAC. So, going through this, you can already tell that there was a lot of offensive firepower for this team last year, and we got to focus on that this year, because that's how you become successful, and then you can incorporate your success from the offense, and then you incorporate that into the defense, and then you create that kind of mechanism there, and then you got a really solid volleyball team. So that's the mindset going through this, reading all the stats and where they should be statistically wise in that category there. Service aces per set around 2.39 average, ranked second in the NWAC. Digs, 951 digs against NWAC competition, ranked 10th in the NWAC. Digs per set, 20.67 average, ranked first in the NWAC. Points, 804 against NWAC competition, ranked 8th in the NWAC. Points per set, 17.5, ranked first in the NWAC. So, like I said, a lot of offensive firepower there. Now, we are going to counter that with volleyball statistics to improve on to become more successful, more of a solid team from last year. So again, 2025 stats. First, we're going to talk about receptions. Okay, so receptions, based on what I looked up and, kind of tried to understand fully, receptions is the first defensive hit after a serve from the other team, and you got to hit it. You got to gain control of the volleyball before you set it up for an offensive comeback where you give it to the setter and all. It's the first hit after the serve from the other team. So that's a reception. 694 of those from the Chukars last year, ranked 26 in the NWAC. That is not where we want to be. We want to be kind of in the 15th and higher range when it comes to ranking. 15th and, lower, 14, 13, blah, blah, blah. We want to be in that range specifically. Block total is also another one. 60, ranked 20th in the NWAC. Again, we don't want to be there as well. Blocks per set, 1.3 average, ranked 19th in the NWAC. So based on that, we weren't the greatest blocking team in the NWAC last year. If we can work on that and get that to be a better actuality, boom, you're going to have a more solid team. You keep up with the offensive stats from last year, and then you improve on the defensive stats, specifically blocking and receptions and stuff. You're going to be a very solid volleyball team coming into 2026. And the other thing I would like to say about this is there are instances in sports, more likely than not, in my opinion, where if you win a championship and you go into the next year and then say you win another championship, odds are if you had a more successful year in the first year, you're gonna have a better overall team the next year, obviously. So I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, okay? Here's an example here, okay? So in 1972, the Miami Dolphins went 17-0, only perfect season in NFL history, won the Super Bowl, beat the Washington Redskins in Los Angeles in Super Bowl 7, and they went 17-0, obviously. Only undefeated team in NFL history. You would think they're the best team in NFL history. But in 1973, we went back to back. We won Super Bowl 8 against the Minnesota Vikings. And if you watch interviews of those Miami Dolphins players in 1973, most of them will say that the 73 team was a way better overall football team than the 1972 season, even though statistics say that they had a worse year in 1973 because they lost a game, obviously. But players will say they were a more solid team the next year, And they had guys picking off three interceptions in the Super Bowl for Miami Dolphin players, for example, And that was in 73. You didn't have that in 1972 when you went undefeated. It's a weird deal, but usually if you have a statistically more successful season in the first year of winning a championship and you win it again the next year, the odds are you're going to have a better, solid team because you've learned from mistakes from the year before, and then you progress that with more success, and we focus on those negatives from a very successful season because not everything is perfect. Not everything is perfect, and if you learn from these statistics, Chukar-wise, you can have a way better, solid team in 2026, and that is a positive. Winning an NWAC championship, because we win, obviously, great, good for you, but a good staff goes in the off season. You look at the statistics and you're like, okay, we need to work on this. We got to work on that, And that goes into my conversation like, you won the title last year. Cool, good for you. Now we're on to 2026. We won the title, cool. Now the mindset is got to be, we got to go after it again. The mindset's got to be, man, we went 0-20 last year. We got to improve. We won the title, obviously, but you got to have the mindset of improving every single day, every single season. And you're never going to get to the highest point that you can. There's always room for improvement. Even if you win a championship, like the Chukars, you look at the stats, you fix things, boom, more solid team. There is my mindset from that. And working on blocking. If you work on blocking and then you stick with the range of the offensive statistics from last year, odds are you're going to have a better volleyball team in 2026. Statistically, recapping this segment of the show, focus on the successful systeming and rhythm of last year's success. Obviously, you keep up doing that, and make sure to realize that this is a new team. The Chukars have to realize this is a new team. A lot of sophomores left. Okay, they have their own thing. They played volleyball their way, and then you got to realize that this is a new team. They have different strengths. You build off of those different strengths, and then you make a very solid volleyball team. You got to think about that as well. And don't ignore those new strengths. As a coaching staff, I'm not saying they won't do this. They are going to do this. It's a good coaching staff. They're going to realize that this team has different strengths, and then you build an offensive and defensive firepower based on these new players' strengths. 11 student athletes in the TVCC volleyball program. There's 11 new faces that are going to be a Chukar this year. It's a new vibe. It's going to be a new team. It's going to look different. You may not be happy with it, coming into like the first week or so. It's going to be a different team, and we got to realize that. And then you get better and better. There's always room for improvement. Let's do it and work on blocks and defensive mechanisms, and then you got it. You're a very solid volleyball team competing for another NWAC title. And the final mindset goal I want to give to you guys, wrapping up this show on What the Chuck. Last year's success, again, like I said earlier, last year's success was last year. Cool, good for us. Yay, we got a ring. Blank slate this year. We were focusing on 2026. We are a new team, okay? Our mindset has got to be, we never won a championship, and we want to win a championship. That is the main goal every year. But that is why, this is another football analogy, but if you win the Super Bowl, next year it has become a more likely thing that you're going to have a Super Bowl slump. Why? Because your mind is going through all of that. Cool, we knew how to do something. We won the Super Bowl. We're the best team ever. You go into the next season, and then you go 4-13. It's happened a lot, actually. And even in like baseball, no shot at anybody, but there is a specific Seattle Mariners player that hit 60 home runs last year, and then the mindset's like, oh cool, I can hit home runs, and then that's the mindset this year. He tries this certain individual tries to hit home runs, and then you realize pitchers are smart. They realize that you're trying to hit home runs, and that is where the breaking balls come in. That is where placement comes in. That is where all that other analytic stuff going on, you got to get that out of your brain, man. The clean slate. Let's go. Let's have a great year this year. That is your breakdown of the 2026 Chukars going into the season. Be sure to check out our new shows coming up, probably day by day, week by week, all that cool stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and go Chucks.